Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So hello everybody. In our last set of talks we were talking about one of the foremost male lay disciples of the Buddha, not Venerable, but Hatthaka of Alavi. And today we're going to be talking about one of the most prominent female lay disciples of the Buddha, and that is Khujjutara. And so, parallel to the passage that I mentioned last time for Hatthaka, the Buddha gives two examples for lay women to follow, and one of them is Khujjutara. So before we talk about who she was, I want to quote this passage from the Samyutta Nikaya. I'll read the Pali, and then I'll give a rough translation. I'll just give the meaning. Suryasya bhikkhave uddayato etang pumbhangamang etang pumbhanimittang yadidang anunuggam evameva ko bhikkhave bhikkhuno hariyasatangikasamaggasa upadaya etang pumbhangamang etang pumbhanimittang yadidang kalyanamittata kalyanamitta setang bhikkhave bhikkhuno patikankang ariyang attangikang maggang bhavesati Ariyang attangikang baggang bahli karisati iti. That's Samyutta Nikaya 49. It's called the Kalyanamitta Sutta. So the meaning is, monks, just as the sun has the light of dawn as the forerunner, so too does the Noble Eightfold Path have noble friendship as the forerunner. One who has a noble friend is expected to develop the Noble Eightfold Path, make much of it. So, actually the sutta goes on and it talks about how they develop the Noble Eightfold Path. But this is very much connected with Sister Khujjutara. Now, aside from being one of the models for lay women, she also was designated as the highest in learning amongst the female lay disciples of the Buddha. She had the greatest knowledge. And so this passage was about noble friendship. So to whom was Khujjutara a noble friend? Well, she had 501 friends that she taught. And how she taught them is an interesting story. So there were 3 verses in the Dhammapada that I thought about discussing today, but actually the cycle of stories that go behind it. So the traditional way of teaching the Dhammapada would be to teach the Dhammapada verses, and then the commentary has a set of stories for each verse. Now these 3 verses have a set of 6 stories, and they tell the stories of King Udena of Kosambi, and of Gosaka, who is the father of the adopted father of one of the queens of King Udena, and then Samavati. So there are like 6 different stories there. It's a very long and interesting cycle, but Khujjutara plays a part in only one section of it. So we'll just sort of skip to that part. So maybe we'll start with King Udena. King Udena was king of Kosambi. Okay, so he had 3 queens. and amongst them was Samavati. Samavati, she had actually been the son of a rich man in the city called Bhadravati, and their family had met with misfortune, and so then they had come to the city of Kosambi on foot under great difficulties, and they were quite ill. Now, in ancient India, people were very proud, and a rich family, somebody from a high caste, wouldn't want to go begging, even if they were at the edge of death. But her father, Bhadavatika, he actually asked her to go to, not to go begging, but to go to like a soup kitchen, because they had charity kitchens in those days. And so he sent his daughter. And so that time there were 3 of them, so she asked for 3 portions of food. And so she brought them back. But the father was ill from exhaustion, but also the mental stress of having asked his daughter to go begging. And he actually passed away after eating the meal. And the second day she went again and brought back food for 2 of them, but this time the mother passed away. The third day she went to the kitchen, and in the kitchen she asked for 1 portion. And at this, one of the guys in the kitchen gave her a piece of his mind. He said, "Finally you understand how much you should be eating." And then she was a bit shocked because she's just lost her 2 parents. And then she said, "Well, what do you mean?" So he said, "Oh, the first day you took 3 portions, the second day you took 2, and now you take 1. And so you know the correct amount to eat." And so she explained to him, "No, that's not really what's happening. Then on the first day there were 3 of us, then there were 2 of us, now there's only 1 of us, only 1. And so the gentleman, he was extremely upset to hear this, and so he adopted her. So they had been on the way to visit a friend of her father, a rich man named Gosika. So Gosika's story is also told in the Dhammapada commentary. It's also a long, interesting story. But this man actually was working under Gosika. So he had adopted Samavati. But when Gosika found out about it, after some time, then he said, "No, I should adopt her. This is the daughter of my friend, my late friend who's recently passed away." So he adopted her, and he gave her a retinue of 500 friends. So she grew up in the city. However, in those days in ancient India, like a daughter of a wealthy family wouldn't go out very much. She wouldn't have a lot of business in the city. She would have lived a very sort of cloistered life. So then finally, one occasion there was a festival. It was one of the rare occasions that she and her friends would actually leave the house, leave the compound. It wouldn't just be a house, it would be like more of an estate or a villa or something. And they went down to the river to bathe. And so when they went down to the river, they passed by King Udena's palace. And so King Udena saw them, and then he fell in love with her. And so he went to Gosika and he said, "I love your daughter, I'm taking her to marry her." And so Gosika said, "No, we don't do it that way here. I won't give away my daughter like that, my adopted daughter. We don't know what you'll do to her, like how you'll treat her." And so the king became very angry, and he kicked out Gosika and the family and locked the gates to the house. So when Samavati came back to the house, she found that the gates were locked, and their family was outside. And so she asked what had happened. And when Gosika told her, she said, No, Dad, that's not how you should act. Then you should tell him, if he'll take all of my friends as well, then I will go marry him. So he said, "Okay, if that's what you want." So he went back to the king, And so the king reinstated Gosika's property, and he married Samavati, and he took the 500 women as her ladies-in-waiting. Now, there are some disadvantages to being in this situation. The advantages, of course, then she wouldn't have to work. In those days, there were multiple queens for these Indian kings, but she was a queen of the highest rank. So there were 3 queens of the highest rank there. And so she had like a whole section of the palace for herself. But, if you've heard the term golden handcuffs, then she was sort of stuck there. She wouldn't be able to leave the palace. But of course, anything she wanted, she would be able to get. She had the wealth of the king, and she had servants. And amongst those servants was one who was slightly hunchbacked, a young woman named Khujjutara. Not only was she humpbacked, but she was crooked in her behavior also, because she was the flower girl for Queen Samavati. And every day she would send Khujjutara to the market to buy 8 gold coins worth of flowers. But Queen Samavati, because she was so cloistered, she didn't actually know the going rate for flowers. So every day Khujjutara would bill for 4 of the coins, and she would buy 4 gold coins worth of flowers and bring them back. And so it was still enough flowers. Maybe the queen didn't notice anything was wrong. Now, the story is actually, the whole story is quite long, but the part that involves Khujjutara is the gardener who sells her the flowers. He got the opportunity to give a dana for the Buddha and the monks who were visiting Kosambi. And just that one day. And so on that day, Khujjutara went there and asked to buy flowers, and he asked her to wait. He said, please, after the monks finish their meal, then I'll wash the bowl, we hear the talk, and I'm going to offer flowers to them. And once I'm finished offering them the flowers, then you can choose amongst the remaining flowers. But I want to give first choice to the monks today. So she was okay with that. She's only getting 4 gold coins worth of flowers, and there were still plenty left. However, quite unexpectedly during the Dhamma talk, she attained stream entry. So if you remember, one of the qualities of a stream enterer is they won't break their sila. So instead of stealing 4 coins that day, she bought 8 coins worth of flowers. And so she went back to visit. She went back to the palace with twice as many flowers as usual. And so Queen Samavati saw all this, and she said, is there like a flower sale today? What's going on? She said, oh, no. Other days I've been stealing for half of the money you give me. And only today I spent all the money on flowers. And so Queen Samavati wasn't stupid. She said, so why are you telling me this? Why are you confessing now? She said, when I bought the flowers, I heard a teaching from the Buddha. And at that time, some kind of special change happened in my mind. Now I can't lie anymore. I can't act that way anymore. So do what you need to do. And so Queen Samavati, she thought, I don't want to punish her. I want to actually also attain this kind of level of understanding. So she said, okay, in that case, I won't punish you. I want you to teach us. You please, every day you go and hear what the Buddha teaches, and come back to the palace, and in our quarters you can teach myself and my 500 maidservants. So Khujjutara said, I will do that, but you have to let me be properly bathed and clothed and prepare a seat. Because when we're listening to the Dhamma, we have to do it in a respectful way. So Surprisingly, the queen agreed. So they had Khujjutara bathed with flower-scented water and dressed in suitable clothing, and then placed on a Dhamma seat. And so she started to report what the Buddha taught day by day. These teachings are collected in a book in the Khuddaka Nikaya called the Itivuttaka. And so they're a set of short suttas. Some of them, they're a little bit similar to some suttas from the Anguttara Nikaya. So there's one thing that, relying on one thing, one abandons all suffering. This kind of sutta. Anyway, so these are the teachings that she gave to the group of the queen and the royal servants in Kosambi. Now, the story goes, as I said, the story is very long. Queen Samavati and her 500 servants die. One of the other queens becomes very jealous, and as she has them all, she manages to kill all of them. But Khujjutara, it seems, survived, and she spent the rest of her life in Dhamma-related activities. We don't have a lot of records of her after that, except these mentions in the Anguttara Nikaya, where it says that she had this quality of the highest in learning amongst the female lay disciples, and is given as the quality of the most exemplary female lay disciple of the Buddha. So, as I said at the start, then instead of doing the Dhammapada verses, I chose a verse from the Samyutta Nikaya about noble friendship. So in this case, because of Khujjutara, because somebody who had attained a stream entry and had heard the Dhamma, then Samavati and her servants were also able to practice the path. So just like as the verse said, if you see the sun rising, if you can see like the first rays of the sun on the horizon, you know the sun's coming up. Then for somebody who has the chance to associate with a noble friend who's helping them to practice the Dhamma, teaching them about the Noble Eightfold Path, and you expect that that person will start to actually practice the Noble Eightfold Path. And there's one other story I thought we'd tell, a modern story. Now, one of the similes that the Buddha gave for overcoming doubt is somebody has lost their way in the wilderness, and then they find their way out. And that feeling of relief is this overcoming of doubt. And so this is a bit tangential, but I think it's a useful reflection, the importance of having the right advice, not only in Dhamma things, but in life. And so I'm sure most of you have heard the story of Hiro Onoda. Maybe you don't know the name. He was a Japanese soldier who was stationed in the Philippines at the end of World War II. And so he was given the orders not to surrender and not to kill himself until he was relieved of his duty. And so when he got there, he was restrained from fulfilling his mission by the senior officers. And so this is right at the end of the war. A lot of them would have surrendered. Some of them were killed. But Hiro Onoda went with a small group. They retreated into the jungle. And so they didn't hear confirmation about the end of the war. They did see leaflets that were dropped, but they thought that with the signature saying the war had ended and that everyone was to surrender, but they didn't believe it. And over the years, they did hear this kind of news, but he and his friends, they thought, no, it's all an enemy trick. Then Japan would never surrender. We wouldn't be getting this kind of information if Japan had lost the war. There wouldn't be anybody left in Japan. It would be completely taken over by foreigners. They had this kind of a view. And slowly, the other soldiers who were fighting in the forest against just villagers, right? There were no more military targets left. Some of them died, some of them surrendered, and finally, after 28 years, he was the last one there. At that time, there was a reporter, or from Japan, and then so he had gone out with the intention of actually meeting this Hiro Onoda. So he'd heard about this person, and so he actually went to the Philippines. He found his jungle hideout, and he went and he talked to him. He managed to get there without getting harmed, and he talked to him, and he told him the war's over, all of these things are happening. But Hiro still wouldn't believe. He said, "I won't surrender unless I get an order from my superior." Now, of course, 28 years later, the person who had been his superior in the military, he was no longer a soldier. Then he had opened a bookshop in Japan. So there was actually another person in charge of that unit, technically his commander, but he wanted to see his old commander. So they brought him back to the Philippines from Japan with a set of orders for him to surrender. And so only after that he finally surrendered, and he was pardoned actually by the Philippine government and returned to Japan. He was able to start a new life, and he did various sorts of things. He wrote a biography. He even started some kind of organization to help troubled youth and things like that. So he was able to start a new life. But the point I want to make is that we also have this kind of situation in our spiritual lives, in our samsara, right? So we also can feel very lost. Sometimes we don't know which direction to go. We don't know who to believe. And sometimes it's right to be just really determined and to go sort of along with what you think is right. But sometimes we need to listen to the advice of others. So we have this beautiful sutta about noble friendship. And then we have this example of Samavati and her servants who actually became stream enterers before they died before they were burned to death in this story, which we didn't relate today. Because of the noble friendship of Khujjutara and, of course, her teacher, the Buddha. So I wish that you may be all able to associate with noble friends. You may not find yourself lost in the wilderness of doubt, and you may all attain Nibbana as swiftly as possible. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.